name is Sarah Mancini. I'm with the Office of Neighborhood Coordination, and I'm here with John DuBois. He's the Assistant City Attorney for the Legal Department. And John, I was hoping you could give us some insight into neighborhood associations and their bylaws. But first, why don't you just tell us about yourself and the work that you do with neighborhoods?
Well, I'm an attorney, and I work for the city. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, so I know Albuquerque and our neighborhoods very well. I work with neighborhoods indirectly, so to speak, because I give legal advice to city officials who work with the neighborhoods.
So why are neighborhood associations' bylaws so important?
Because bylaws are the written rules that control the internal behavior of the neighborhood association. And they're very important in setting out the goals of the neighborhood association. They are legally binding on the neighborhood association if they get into some type of legal conflict. And they help the neighborhood associations run smoothly and to communicate better not only with other neighborhood associations but also with their municipal government. And also, if they want to be recognized by the city of Albuquerque municipal government, their bylaws have to contain certain criteria.
And what would that criteria be?
Well, first of all, it has to describe their boundaries, and those have to meet certain issues. Also, they have to have full and open membership to everyone living within those boundaries and every legal entity that owns property within their boundaries. And then also, their bylaws should describe the fact that they have at least one annual meeting which is well advertised, in which they can elect officers and take votes and so forth.
So outside of what the city looks for, there's still some important things that a neighborhood needs to consider when either drafting bylaws for the first time or amending their bylaws. And I'm sure you've read a lot of different versions of bylaws. Do you have any insight into what makes a successful association when it comes to their bylaws, or well-functioning association?
Yes. A neighborhood association is like a living organism. And so they really should think about, one, being able to be flexible and to adapt. So they should think about having very clear guidelines as to how they can amend their bylaws.
And what other things should they consider when amending or drafting bylaws?
The worst case scenarios. And it's unfortunate, but generally people are optimistic when they're setting up their organizations or when you join an organization. But the rules should be written for yourself thinking about what happens if we have members who are contrarians, who are naysayers, who are not going along with the normal course of business. And how do we handle them? What do the rules say? What do we do with officers who are not doing their job? How are they handled? How can we remove those officers from their positions? And you have to anticipate the worst in order to achieve the best.
That's a good point. Is there anything else that you feel like associations should keep in mind as they form and do the work that they're destined to do in the community?
Yes. One thing is there are a lot of good bylaws out there. And a lot of neighborhood associations post their bylaws on websites. And so take a look. Why reinvent the wheel? Take a look at what other neighborhood associations have done and take from them the best, and then add to it and post your own bylaws on a website. I would point out that neighborhood associations that wish to be recognized by the city of Albuquerque have to have their bylaws given to the city of Albuquerque, and any updates and so forth they have to give to the city of Albuquerque as well. And so people could also find out other neighborhood associations bylaws through searching through documents at the city of Albuquerque.
And through the Office of Neighborhood Coordination.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then last but not least, I would say work with the Office of Neighborhood Coordination. That's what they're there for. And so why go through a lot of heartache of having done something and then find out that you could have done something better, faster, or done that you actually needed to do something else. And so coordinate with your Office of Neighborhood Coordination.
One question that we get often is asking the Office of Neighborhood Coordination to enforce an association's bylaws or to step in if maybe the bylaws weren't followed during an election process. What is your response to that?
The city of Albuquerque does not regulate neighborhood associations. Neighborhood associations are private organizations. The Albuquerque municipal government simply recognizes or does not recognize a neighborhood association based on certain criteria that is set forth in an ordinance. And it's totally up to that neighborhood association whether or not they want to behave in a fashion that will cause them to be recognized, or if they behave in a fashion that causes them to be de-recognized, so to speak, that the city of Albuquerque will no longer recognize them. And so these, but we do not regulate them. We do not go out and force them to do this. It's completely voluntary on their part, but they risk being not recognized by the city of Albuquerque, but they still exist as organizations.
Interesting. Is there anything else that you think an association should keep in mind?
I think that's about everything. I think that the bylaws are super important, and they should really concentrate a lot also on putting forth the goals of that neighborhood association. Because it'll be, they may be surprised, but people will come along and say, you know what we ought to do? We ought to build a rocket ship to the moon. And other people will get excited and say, yes, we can be the first neighborhood association in Albuquerque to build a rocket ship to the moon. So let's and everybody will get excited. And next thing you know, people are doing this or are getting excited about it, and then somebody needs to point out to say, wait a minute. Is that really what a neighborhood association should be doing? Is that really one of our goals, to build a rocket ship to the moon? Aren't we more concerned about crime in the neighborhood, about what type of businesses are moving into the neighborhood, about economic development, about planning issues and things like that, and not really building a rocket ship to the moon. And if it was in your bylaws, you could absolutely enforce it and say, no, there's nowhere in our bylaws that says anything about planetary travel, and so that's not germane to our organization. And that if you want to do that, you need to form some other organization, but don't waste our time on it. And so setting forth the goals, which often gets overlooked, can be really important to explicitly define what the goals of the neighborhood are.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
I'm sure we'll be chatting with you in the future about neighborhoods and how to best support them.
Thank you.